we're going to wrap up this hour of John and Friends with a conversation with Buzz Stewart, who's the CEO of Medcurio. Buzz, hopefully you're on the line.
Oh, can
There you are.
Okay.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
So we've had a lot of conversations over the last hour and a half about, the innovations in healthcare, but it's tend to be focused on what I'd call the clinical character of healthcare as experienced by the individual, whether it be, the difference between men and women, the difference in which the tools intervene in our lives, the way the tools turn into population health outcomes, et cetera. Now, you're at a much different place in healthcare, and I think one that is so fundamentally important, which is how does healthcare systematically work? I mean, it's one thing to have a gee whiz device on my hand. It's another to have somebody look at it and says, hey, you've got heart disease. But more importantly, when the therapy associated with my diagnosis time to be delivered, the system grinds to a halt. And so you're at the forefront of trying to actually throw some lubricant into the gears and take some gears out. And so I'm curious, number one, how you guys are doing it. And let's start with EHR data, because in the end, in the absence of somebody knowing something about John, when they touch me and poke me, they're kind of operating blind. So what are you guys focused on? And importantly, how does EHR play into that?
Well, so we believe from 16 years of experience living in healthcare, trying to make more effective use of the data, that there have always been two longstanding pressures that healthcare have faced. It's not new to business in general, but those pressures are really starting to create a squeeze. So one is the unending pressure from the decline in reimbursements. So how much money you get for the same service has been dropping for 40, 50 years. And then the other is the way in which the cost of labor and other costs continue to increase faster than inflation. And so that squeeze doesn't leave many options for any business sector. And the usual solution is you have to figure out how to do more with less. You always come to automation because that's the way in which you do it. And by automation, I don't mean replacing doctors and things of that sort. There are many things that we can do to make things better, faster, and less expensive, all at the same time. And the challenge with automation always is, no matter where it is, you need real-time data to drive it, especially in the service business, because so much of the service business is about communicating, knowing things about the customer and things of that sort. So real-time electronic health record data are essential, really, and being able to move that in facile ways is essential to scaling automation. And it's true whether you're talking about revenue cycle management, supply chain, the front line of care, patient support services, they all would benefit from having an effective way of triggering AI processes to get work done and things of that sort. And the unique thing about electronic health record data is that it intersects with all of these other data domains that are related to different kinds of services, whether it's on the HR side, the back office, or the front office. And so it is the essential ingredient or fuel that sometimes is combined with other data sources to make things work. And so we believe it's critical to figure out how to drive it.
So it's the main pole in the tent.
Yes, exactly. Yes, very good analogy. Yeah.
So that's, you've made a good case for there being a foundation or a main pole. But I'm curious now, what do we misunderstand about interoperability? Because it's one thing to have a foundation and a connectedness, but the connectedness doesn't automatically infer interoperability. And so essentially there's the core, there's the connections, and then there's the way in which the pieces interoperate. So I'm curious about how that affects optimizing workflows and real-time access.
Yeah, so that makes me think of Groundhog Day. Because of how many times I've seen the same scenario play out among the same group, and different groups all experience the same thing. And I think the common view, and I think it's increasingly so even with AI and certainly with automation, is that you spend so much time inventing and developing your solution that you think that the work is done once you've perfected it. And then when you actually have to cross the threshold and figure out how to get it operating in practice, that's where you hit a wall, and that's where you realize your work is only half done. And the hardest part of the work is to come, because it's a part of work that you actually can't control. And so the challenge that everybody faces is they have an application that might be really sophisticated, and now they have to figure out how to get data from the electronic health record in real time to their application to drive the processes that make it do its special magic. And the problem is we all are equipped with the same, what I call workaround tools. Others call them interoperability tools, but I call them workaround tools because they weren't designed for automation. They were things we pulled off the shelf when automation came to the front and just said, well, hey, here's some things that you can use. And the experience is common across the board. They just don't work that well. There are data fields that you can't get to. Sometimes the data doesn't arrive on time, or it just doesn't arrive. So there's all kinds of mishaps and challenges in trying to use those that make it very, very difficult to keep your application running well in production. And so you're left to beef up the team that's trying to manage keeping that thing running in production so that your customers continue to trust what it is that you're offering them.
Yep. So I'm going to ask you for some examples in a moment, but let me provide a little context, because this discussion of interoperability and EHR at the kind of the heart of it, it kind of triggered this story, which I shared a little bit earlier, but I'll repeat it quickly, which is a family member, got what I'd call the traditional answer. Yeah, you need some tests, schedule them. They're 3 to 6 to 8 weeks out. And so as an alternative, they went to Mayo. I had heard the name before, but they went to Mayo. And at Mayo, they got to talk to a doctor for an hour. The doctors prescribed some tests, which are done within 24 hours. They were actually able to see the results of the test within minutes after the tests were completed. And within 4 hours, the doctor then intervened and said, here's the significance based on what I've seen. Now, that's wow, right?
Yes.
But that's Mayo. So, so what I'm looking at is, number one, Mayo is highly integrated, and I've known them since I lived in Minneapolis too long ago to remember, and respected the fact that they are a highly integrated, systematic organization, number one. So number one, they're integrated. Number two, they got some really smart IT folks. So for the non-Mayo part of healthcare, what are some examples of the kinds of automation and integration that Mayo is able to do? And I think that, you guys are potentially able to help move along.
Yeah, gosh, there's so many of them, because when I think of where automation is important, I go to where the healthcare dollar is spent, right? And so it's the front line of care, where certainly there's amazing things that we could do to liberate doctor time to spend that hour with the patient, talking to them, while documentation gets done automatically, orders are teed up automatically, that whole process. All of that today is theoretically possible, but practically not, because it's difficult to move the data. I think of patient support services and the ways in which we could scale those on like a Salesforce CRM platform and do things that would seem unbelievable today in terms of delivering precisely to the patient's need in a way that they can afford and that enhances their experience. And then I would say the same thing for the back office, RCM, revenue cycle management, supply chain, and things of that sort. But I'm just going to build on your example and just take a referral management process, right? So how does referral management work? It's actually one of the more complicated areas of scheduling an appointment for a patient, because the physician, your primary care physician, might, let's say, refer you to a urologist for enlarged prostate, and he or she doesn't really know that much about your insurance or coverage of that stuff. And so what you'd like to happen is that order gets submitted, and then it automatically triggers a protocol where on a Salesforce CRM example, for example, an AI engine gets the notification, it goes into the patient record, it gets all their information on their insurance coverage, where they live, on the priorities that they have in terms of what labs need to be done before they see that doctor, so the sequencing is done correctly, and all that information, and then can automatically identify referral candidates, prioritize them by what fits, and then trigger an agent, a human agent, to reach out to the patient. But now they've done the 10 to 15 minutes of upfront work, and have summarized it in a way that that agent can deliver precise referral guidance and care for that patient, so that the patient gets the labs done before they have the visit, gets to a referral physician that their insurance covers, all those kinds of things that happen, where when the mistakes happen, they all fall to the patient basically and having to pay the price. So there are endless examples of that kind of process, I think, where more precise, more satisfying, and effective care can be delivered at a much, much lower cost.
This kind of triggers another kind of word picture for me, which is the tribal behavior of vendor-controlled solutions that exist in healthcare. When I say tribal behavior, everybody defends their tribal territory and are largely unwilling to either build bridges or to create, passageways between them, which might have been for the collective good, but it might have, kind of rebalanced the relationship a little bit. So I'm curious about this historical friction of tribal or vendor-controlled access, and to what degree is that hindering the picture that you were just representing?
Yeah, it reminds me of a term that somebody used the other day, who I was talking to, who knows a lot about this space, and he calls it the walled garden phenomenon.
Yeah.
And of course, we know about that in our generation. We know about that from the early days of the internet and how long that lasted. And walled gardens are a way of keeping the competition out. But at the end of the day, the walled gardens usually can't be sustained because the market figures out how to solve the problem. And then it's really the market that's more inventive than any single EHR vendor or anybody can be. And I think that's what we need to get to, because those tools that we have, HL7, Fire, vendor APIs, even custom coded APIs, just can't get us to where we need to get to. We need to have really straightforward, low cost, secure, fast ways of moving data in real time, so that our focus isn't around trying to get the data. Our focus is around the patient, their needs, and how we build solutions that address those needs, is around the overburdened physician and nurses that have to deliver those cares, offloading that work so that they can get back to being what they want to be, and that is great doctors and nurses. And it is all about breaking down the walled garden and structuring things in a way where health systems actually have access and control of their own data to do with it what they want, and not require the permission of the vendor to allow them to use their data.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a word picture that just occurred to me as we're having this conversation. You guys at Medcurio represents a drone which can rise above the walled gardens, look across all of them, and kind of quickly identify what you need to know from all of those independent areas, and assemble it, as a useful picture to the people who you're trying to serve. And so, well done, drone master. But as a closing question, why we've lived with this for decades. I mean, we've both been around long enough to have bruises and scar tissue that are very old and crusty. Why do you think health system leadership still accepts this as a status quo? This what I'd call walled garden or tribal behavior, because at the end of the day, it's the collective value of all of those pieces that really help improve healthcare, and yet healthcare leadership seems to be content to leave it the way it is.
It's a really good question. We are locked in a framework today still, although I think it's beginning to break down because executives and health systems feel the urgency to really transform their business and bring automation into it. And I think eventually that's going to dominate their thinking, versus it being dominated by what they're being told by their vendors, that these are the methods that you can use or you have to use, which they don't actually. I mean, those kinds of constraints can't be imposed on those who have stewardship over the data and that own access. But I think that I often see health systems in sort of two very different kinds of situations. One is they're early in their journey around automation, which means they haven't done much. And so they don't really know that they have limited access because they haven't really tried. And they don't really understand what they're going through when they're attempting to move beyond retrospective data analysis and starting to use things in real time. So they're not going to get there unless they're pushed really quickly, which I think they will be, to start doing more with their data. And then they're going to hit a wall in a way where they're going to wonder, what is this? Why can't I get my own data? But the more advanced systems have lots of experience with this. And they've developed workarounds around the workaround. So they have layers of work that dominate. And it's almost as though that becomes their status quo. The hard way of doing things becomes their status quo. And it's very hard for them to break out of that, even though if it goes up to the CFO or the CEO, it's costing them a fortune because of what they aren't doing with their data. But I don't think that message is getting across. Often it's defaulted to the CIO making the decision, but the CIO has a very narrow focus and scope where they believe that the way to do things with the existing tools is the safest way, which it turns out not to be true necessarily.
So, well, we all have grown up learning to protect our backside. So,
yes,
or protect our six, so to speak.
Yes, it's natural.
Buzz, it's been great talking to you, and look forward to continuing this chat again in another venue. Take care.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. Bye.